Well, hello, it's Barry Winbolt here again with a new episode of Get a Better Handle on Life. Today I'm going to be in discussion with an interesting chap. We've spoken before on this podcast about work-related matters. Over the last couple of years we've had a lot of change thrust upon us. Some of those changes less wished for than others, but one of the things that has been perhaps a mixed blessing is the fact that so many of us had to work from home, and then it became a question of choice, it seems, for many, that we have adopted much more flexible attitudes towards presence or not in the office. So I wanted to explore that a bit further, and I was thinking about this recently when, hey presto, something landed on my desk from today's desk. Anyway, my guest today is a regular contributor to this podcast, Rick Gough. Hello, Rick, and thank you very much for joining me.
Good afternoon, Barry. Nice to be here.
And we have been talking about this idea, or you have been talking about this idea of working from home. And I think you mentioned the other day when we spoke, it might seem to some people a little old hat because we're kind of moving on from the pandemic and all of that. But I think the key point here is that we now have data, we now have experience of working from home, and you're in touch with a lot of people, with your colleagues and so forth. And I think you have some really insightful comments and ideas. And so we arranged to have a conversation about working from home. And you'd listed a number of positives, some things you miss, some of the dangers, and what happens when we go back. Now, I don't think we'll get all through it in 20 minutes or half an hour today, but maybe we could start that conversation. What do you think?
I think that'd be great. I think it's a very interesting time, isn't it? Because we were forced to all work from home a couple of years ago. And now that seems to be a movement towards saying, okay, well, maybe we're moving into a new phase. And do I have a choice? Do I continue to work from home, or do I go back into the office full time or part? And what do I want to do? And I think that it's talking to you and listing those things down has helped me evaluate that situation and make a choice of what I want to do.
And is it a choice for you? Just let's get that. You work for a large, huge multinational. You've got a lot of experience in business and as a manager, and you are able to choose the degree to which you are in the office or not. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been very fortunate that there has been a policy developed to allow people to be a virtual worker if they want to, or go back into the office if they want to.
Okay. And so you've been evaluating that, but the idea that you're evaluating it suggests that it wasn't a hands-down decision straight away for you, that you did it because you were forced to, and then there was a period of reflection, and then you are then making a decision, okay, is this how it's going to be from now on? Am I right? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's always been a view of people working from home pre-pandemic, pre-COVID and everything else, is that, when you said, I'm going to work from home on Fridays, everybody, oh yeah, I understand, you've got your washing to do, you've got to get ready for the weekend, that sort of stuff. But I always felt that actually working from home made me approach my work in a different way, and I had a different perspective, and it was actually a very healthy thing. And yes, I was in control a lot more of my day. I wasn't interrupted, all that sort of stuff. But I thought, yeah, I enjoy working from home. But I think that there was always an advantage for everybody being in the office. I think everybody being there together, out of sight, out of mind. And I always kind of felt that. Whereas when everybody was working from home, it really leveled the playing field.
Okay.
So I think that in this next 6 months, where a percentage of people going back, will that out of sight, out of mind still play out, or will people be a lot more mindful of, hey, they're at home, they're remote, let's make sure that the facilitator of the call or however we're talking to each other remembers that and makes sure that we keep getting everybody involved and engaged in all conversations.
Yeah. I'll interject something, kind of a historical note, if I can call it that, which is that you have worked from home by a part of your time in the past when things were the old way of working, as did I. And I found I got more done at home, particularly when the office went to open plan where I worked. And so I really favoured working from home if I wanted to get my head down and get some work done. But it took a positive, proactive step, if that's the expression, for me to stay in touch with people. But what I couldn't control was the attitude of people in the office that you've just touched on, out of sight, out of mind, people thinking, well, it's not really work if you're at home. And I have my sister worked from home for something like 20 years because her job required her to be based at home and travel all over the country. And she reported this as well, that when you pitch up at the office, you're not kind of seen as a member of the team in quite the same way that you are if you are present. And the problem with that, or the underlying cause of that, is why I'm interjecting this now, is actually inbuilt into human beings. It's groups, it's how we socialize, it's how we function. So if you want to overcome that sense of disconnect between people at home and the them and us, basically, of we're in the office, they're not type of thing, then something needs to be done in the office to make that happen. And you've just mentioned one thing, which would be the facilitator of a call, for example, would acknowledge people in a certain way, or it would be a topic of conversation in some way. It would surface this unsaid and unseen kind of division and make it real so that people could then actually make choices about overcoming it.
Yes, and I think the days of where there's appraisals and performance-related pay, there's a perception of your level of engagement, how much am I contributing? And I think that if you're never in the office, you have to work hard to make your voice heard rather than just kind of being physically in the office so people can see you there, can see you working. If you're not there, how do people know you're part of the team? What do I need to go out of my way to demonstrate all that, or people just naturally trust me? And I think pre-pandemic, you had to make a noise to make sure people were aware that you were working from home, and I don't think that's the case anymore.
No. What, you don't think that's the case anymore? You mean it's more accepted now, and so you don't have to work so hard to be respected in the same way, even though you're not physically present in the office?
Exactly. I think because everybody's done it and everybody knows there are pros and cons and what it's like to be working from home, and that actually we've all survived. All the businesses, well, lots of businesses have survived quite successfully with everybody working remotely.
Yes. So, because somebody listening to this now might listen to the last 5 minutes and think it sounds pretty pessimistic that actually working from home is possibly the path to being alienated from your colleagues. But you're saying that now that's not the case, that people are, they've all come to accept that it's an equal footing wherever you are physically located.
I completely agree. And I think that there's a culture of cameras on, cameras off, and depends, I spend 5 or 6 hours a day on calls, and a lot of my work is done over the phone remotely, and there are some groups of people I go to calls with that never turn their cameras on, and you kind of think, okay, that's fine, but there's some of us that always do, and I've got nothing to hide and I'm quite happy to, and you kind of think, okay, well, have they got the camera turned off because they're multitasking and they're doing emails and stuff in the background, or maybe they're not actually there, they've just attended the call and they're listed as attendee, but they've got off to hang the washing up. I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting point you're raising. I mean, it reminds me of the early days of email when we had to have codes of etiquette, codes of conduct with regard to how we communicated using online resources. And in a way, you're suggesting there should be a code of etiquette for online calls. And I suppose these do exist, and they're informal. They're kind of understood. They're implicit. But actually, what you just mentioned could possibly be a topic of conversation in groups or teams, because in a way, personally, when I'm talking to groups, I have to respect it if somebody doesn't want their camera on. But at the same time, like you, it puts a question in my mind. And I think, well, why aren't you able to be present, fully present? And for people who do work without their camera on, there might be very good reasons, But we got phony backgrounds these days. We can have virtual backgrounds and things. So there's no reason that our environment should affect whether we use a camera or not. It's almost like you could be in a live physical meeting, but have your eyes glued to the phone. It wouldn't be acceptable. And if there's a possibility of that, we need to see people's faces to communicate, really. It's bad enough being at a distance like this and online, but it would be nice, at least the most respectful thing would be to have your camera on, it would seem to me.
Yes, you don't need me to tell you about the non-verbal communication and all of those sort of things and body language. And I think that as we, two of us talking, it's quite easy to say, okay, when Barry stops, then I can say something, etc., etc. But when you've got 6-10 people on a call, how do you get across? If you're a bit introverted or a bit shy or not as confident about sharing the information you want, and the topic moves on, but you haven't had the opportunity to get your point across, I think that's a lot harder being on a camera on a screen in the corner of the room, rather than actually if you're in the room, maybe whoever's running the meeting may spot that and invite you in. And I think you have to work harder being remote to get that across.
Yes, I can see that. And so, the positives gained from working from home. Could you say something about that? What is your view of the positive aspects for you?
I have so much more time back that I'm not commuting because I just don't have to go anywhere. I'm fortunate that during lockdown we were able to build a cabin in the garden, and I'm sitting here now, and there's blue tits feeding on the bird feeder outside the window. I arrive at my desk just in a much more calm way. I haven't got all stressed about the drive. I haven't got all worried about parking. I haven't had to run, or the lift didn't work or whatever. I just kind of very calmly, from getting out of bed to starting work, it's all so much more tranquil. And that is a massive benefit that is so easily overlooked that I really enjoy. And I think there's other things that come in. I don't. It's very easy to go off and get a coffee, and very easy to go off and go into town and spend money and things like that. So actually, when I'm here, because I'm able to sit down and focus and complete the tasks that I need to do, and I've actually got a lot more organized being at home. I'm not interrupted the whole time, so I think I'm a lot more productive working from home. I don't spend anywhere near the amount of money on rubbish that I don't need, or coffees and things like that, because I can just go to the kitchen and get one. But I think it's also because we have a certain level of freedom allowed to us. As long as you're delivering what's being asked of you, nobody's complaining, and everybody's happy with your contributions, you're meeting what's expected of you, then I can say, okay, well, do you know what? I've got a gap between 11 and 12. Let me set the dog out and just enjoy the sunshine. And I couldn't do that.
Well, and which is, of course, better for your emotional and psychological well-being as well as your physical well-being. And it sounds as if you're saying, in a way, there's much more you can control when you're working at home. It gives you more freedom to manage your day as you want. I would certainly join, and there's, I believe, from way back research showing that people who work from home, I already mentioned my sister, she was always quoting the productivity figures at me, that people who work from home are X% more productive than those who are in the office. But what I think it's also pointing to, what I'm curious about is, one of the things I'm curious about is that it actually is leaning towards a different relationship with our employers, implying greater trust. And rather than being, the old industrial model was you make 47 widgets an hour and you get paid for 47 widgets an hour. And if it drops to 43, your pay's under threat. Whereas now, as long as at the end of the week you've produced your quota of widgets, it doesn't matter whether you had a fast hour or a slow hour or even a day off, as long as the quality is okay and so it's output rather than presence, which is on which you are being judged. Is that a fair observation?
I think that's yes. And to take it another step forward, if I didn't start until 10, 10:30, I could go on and finish at 6, 6:30, and that's fine. I'm delivering on my expectations. I know what I'm responsible for, and if I'm getting that done, then everybody's okay about it. And so I've got a lot more flexibility working from home than I would do. And I think there's a kind of expectation if you come in, and maybe it was just me, but if you came into the office at 9:30, a lot of people that have been there since 8 would look up at you, and there would be a bit of guilt.
Judged,
or if you left at 4:30. But now I haven't got that, and I don't have to explain myself to anybody.
Absolutely. So there's a lot going for it. And then, of course, there's the environmental impact, which I know you've already mentioned elsewhere, about one car less on the road, lower costs to you. But what about people who you've built a cabin? As I can see, we're on visual at the moment, and I've got my camera on, of course, and so I can see the lovely setup. And in fact, I just noticed over your shoulder a squirrel scurrying up the fence behind you. So it's quite bucolic and very, very relaxing. And that has to be good for anybody. But what about people who don't have the wherewithal to provide themselves with a separate? Do you interact with anybody who is kind of feels they're more trapped in a domestic environment, for example, and just space-wise, it just isn't that easy for them to have dedicated space?
Yes, and I think over the last couple of years, with people having their cameras on, you see a lot of people that have got other people in the house moving around behind them, pets, dogs barking, all that sort of stuff going on. And I think that, yes, that must be a very different situation. It must be hard to be able to focus, be able to get some time out and find space to be able to work. I can see that. But I do think that there are so many positives that I can, eat my wife for lunch every day and eat healthily of a choice of what I want, which just wasn't possible before. So I think that there is, a lot to be said for that.
And is there anything you miss from not going into the office? I mean, it's obvious speaking to you and knowing you that this is a huge positive, it's a huge plus for you. Is there anything you miss within that?
I know I said that I get a lot of time back by not commuting, but I'm a big reflector, and I like and I think I'm quite creative, and my mind drifts. And so actually sitting in the car, going to work or on the way back from work, it was a big thing for me where I used to be able to wander and think of things. And I actually solved lots of problems in the car. So not having that time, funny enough, I miss it. Whilst I said I enjoy not having to do that, I recognize that was a time of contemplation or my time that I don't get anymore. So that's a funny one.
Well,
but it's
a very interesting point because it says a couple of things to me. I mean, for a start, I used to travel, as you know, a lot, and a lot of it was spent in the car. And one of the things I miss is that I would listen to a lot of radio podcasts more latterly, but before that I'd be listening to tapes or DVDs, CDs that I picked up that related to my own development. So they would be things about psychology or human behavior or subjects that interested me. Or if I didn't, as a book I thought I should be really at least skimming, I'd actually get the audio book and listen to that on my 2-hour commute or 2.5-hour commute. And I got a lot of extra information that way. And I share with you the idea of actually reflective time is very, very important. Unless we create spaces, so this is the second point I think that comes out of that for me, which is we need to create spaces to have our own needs met. And the fact that it is a walk down the garden instead of a commute means you've been deprived of that reflective space. And you've pointed to the fact by saying that actually we don't put those things back. We don't say, well, because I used to have a commute and I'm now not commuting for, say, 10 hours a week, I'm going to spend an hour a day walking. Or we just don't do that because life gets in the way and all of that stuff. So that's an interesting observation because I suppose it can become a bit isolating. What else is there? How about interactions at work? Do you miss any of those?
Well, I think that's a really key one. I do like a bit of banter and just being able to turn around to somebody and say, "Hey, do you know what is the currency in Romania right now?" Without having to look it up, or just kind of asking somebody reassurance about something, or just talk about the documentary you saw on the television. I like that human interaction that you just don't get anymore, and I do miss that, and I do miss that kind of social side of things. And there's, having worked in the office for 25 years, you do build up a rapport with lots of people, and it's just nice to say hello to people and see how they are and things like that. And I think that you just don't get that. But following on from that is building new relationships. It's a lot harder not being in person when you haven't shaken somebody's hand.
Say a little bit more about that. How is it different when you're working from home? What makes that social connection less likely to happen or not so easily done? Because one might think that if you can give somebody your full attention, albeit on a Zoom call, that it might not be a bad way to get to meet people without the distractions around you in the office.
Really met them, it can be just take a bit longer to really get to know somebody. I think when you join, like I said, a lot of my work is on the phone, but you join a phone call with an objective. You're going to discuss that. You're going to you've got an outcome in mind of where you want to go. So very quickly you jump into that because that's what you're there to do. And I think that when you're in the office, there's often conversations, you have polite chit chat, you talk about each other, you talk about other things, the water cooler conversations and like that, which you just don't get because everybody just kind of gets straight down to business. So I know our team, we've made time within the week to have non-work conversations because everybody was missing out on those, and I hope that they will stay.
And how did you do that? That sounds like a really interesting innovation. How did you do that?
It was just called a coffee chat. I think somebody posted it, and we just meet at 9:30 every Monday as a team. And the rule is we don't talk about work. So what's happening in the world? What did you do this weekend? How's the weather with you, etc., etc. And it's just a nice way to check in. Quite look forward to it. Some weeks it's very dry, and maybe people don't have much to say. Other weeks we could overflow by an hour, but it's just it's a very nice way to connect with your colleagues.
Mm. And you pointed to the fact that you're a manager of a certain age with a long experience in the office. But I suppose for somebody who's in their first or second job, maybe in their early 20s or even before, which is where we know a lot of people they develop social skills, they make social connections, they make friendships. So it's a very relevant point, isn't it? That for some people it would be more urgent that time in the office than perhaps others. Maybe the compensations outweigh the inconvenience in your case, and you've you're able to put things in place to compensate to some degree. But for somebody who doesn't have your depth of experience or your time in life when perhaps you are more content to be shut away in your cabin at the bottom of the garden, it could be a different kettle of fish, couldn't it?
Yes, and I think it goes back to something we talked about earlier, is that there's a level of trust now. So I am trusted to be able to get on and do what's asked of me because I've got a certain amount of tenure and experience and evidence of track record that I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's okay. And I think, but maybe somebody new or somebody else hasn't got that, and therefore that level of trust would have to be built up. And it just seems that's easier in person. I don't know why. Is that just human behaviour, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can't remember what it was like to be in a first job. Really, I don't know if you can. But when you think about it, kind of theoretically, we're modelling the behaviour of those around us when we go into a job. We're learning a lot more than the job. We're learning, how to behave and all sorts of other things, how to interact. And if one is by oneself and one is, young and relatively inexperienced, then there are all sorts of things you're not picking up on, which could be, in terms of work development, one's ability to work in a certain way, could be quite a deprivation, I would imagine. So, for example, if you are longer in the tooth, if you've got more experience, then you can spot when things may not be working. But if you're 21 and it's your first job, or you're eager to appear a certain way because you're a bit more driven, or maybe you're uncertain of how to be received. So it's very double-edged, that idea of building a reputation, but also building a reputation of trust, if I can call it that, but also building one's own repertoire of understanding of the workplace and skills and knowledge of other people. A lot of people will say, a lot of good managers will say they've become good managers because they had a good manager at some time. But I would suggest that remotely that's not going to happen in the same way if you're not around that good manager and it's just somebody you report into on a daily or weekly basis. It's a different thing, isn't it, altogether?
Yeah, and I think going back to the other bit as well about non-verbal skills and communication is, if I'm talking, is somebody writing down what I'm saying? Am I saying the right things? Is my level of passion about the subject coming across? Am I being fully understood? Can I pick up enough of that just by seeing their head?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
you kind of, and maybe that's an experience thing. Maybe that's, you can do that in the questions you ask to check that, but you probably have to work harder at it than you maybe would if you were in person.
Yeah. Well, look, Rick, I mean, it's been a fascinating conversation. As I predicted at the beginning, there's no way we're going to get through this whole topic today, because I wanted to ask you about whether there are any pitfalls or dangers and what happens if things change. We won't go there for now, because I know you've got something else. And as a responsible home worker, you're going to meet your commitment of a call in about 2 minutes, I think, judging by what I can see here. So it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. And so it fertilizes ideas, these conversations, in me. I'm really grateful for it. I just hope people listening to this, and by the way, if you are listening to this, maybe fire us off something to encourage us. Tell us we're on the right track. Tell Rick what you think of his points, anything. But I'll put a link in the blurb to the podcast. But feedback is what feeds us. So I'd ask you, if you're listening to this, to really interact with us and let us know whether this is a topic we should revisit.
But also, to add to that, does anybody else got any other benefits that they're realising that they didn't expect? That would be really interesting.
That is a lovely idea. Okay, well, let's hope it gets some. Do put fingers to keyboard, folks. Do respond to Rick's request. If you can ignore me, but don't ignore this fabulous guy I'm talking to. So, Rick, thank you very much for your time. I will let you go now, as people say, and I'm sure we'll pick up again soon. And I'd like to finish this topic, or come back to this topic when we're both a little bit freer. Well, it's been really great talking to you, Rick, and I know we'll revisit this topic, and let's hope that we get enough feedback to inspire us to new heights. So thank you very much for your time today.
Absolute, Barry. It's been a pleasure and I really enjoyed it. I'm sure there's lots more we can talk about, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rick. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Barry.
And that brings us to the end of this very enjoyable episode, for me anyway, of the podcast, Get a Better Handle on Life. What do you think about this topic of working from home? Does it concern you in some way? Are you one of those people who's been told to work from home and you don't want to be? Or are you enjoying, like Rick does, working from home? What do you think the advantages are for you personally? Please email us and let us know. And we'll weave that into the follow-up to this episode, which will come along in a few weeks. You can email us at info@barrywinbolt.com, and I look forward to receiving your comments. And of course, we will respond in person as well as on the podcast. No names, no pack drill, all anonymous if you want it to be that way. But it's just to create a bit of interaction and start a debate. So be really grateful if you could send us a sign and let us know what you think, for or against. All the best, and over to you until the next time. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.